So guys, it's finally over. After months of rumors, speculation, and nonstop drama, A.J. Brown is officially gone. The Eagles have traded one of the best wide receivers in franchise history, and now that the deal is done, Howie Roseman has finally given us a clear picture of how we got here. Because the more you listen to what Howie had to say, the more obvious it becomes that this trade was about a lot more than draft picks and money. It was about a situation that had reached a point where both sides knew a change was coming. But that's not all we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about the Eagles' plan moving forward, the new additions they've made at wide receiver, how they plan to replace A.J. Brown's production, and what this means for Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, and this offense going into 2026. What's up, Eagles? Welcome to the NFL Playbook. Eagles, if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. To really understand why this happened, we have to look closely at the exact words Howie Roseman used after the trade became official. Howie explained that A.J. Brown felt like at this specific stage of his career, both for himself and his family, there was another direction that he preferred going forward. That single statement already tells us a lot, because for months, the fan base had been trying to figure out what was actually going on behind the scenes. Some people believed it was about the offensive scheme, others thought it was a target share issue, some pointed toward a contract situation, and others felt like the relationship between player and organization had slowly started to shift over time. But when Howie spoke, he did not point toward any specific football problem as the main reason. Instead, he made it clear that A.J. Brown simply saw a different direction for his future. That detail is important because it changes the entire narrative of the situation. This was not the Eagles deciding that he was no longer elite or that his production had fallen off. It was not a case of declining performance or locker room conflict. It was simply a moment where both sides were no longer fully aligned on what the future should look like. And once that happens in the NFL, decisions tend to move quickly rather than slowly. This becomes even more interesting when you look at the phrase Howie used, which was parallel paths. What he meant by that is the Eagles believe they could still remain a strong and competitive football team with A.J. Brown on the roster, but at the same time, they also believe they could build a championship-level roster without him. That type of honesty is rare in the NFL because most general managers try to frame a star departure as a clear win for the organization, but Howie did not take that approach. Instead, he openly acknowledged A.J. Brown as a rare elite talent who had already played a major role in the success of the franchise. That matters because it confirms that this was not about replacing a declining player or correcting a mistake. It was about long-term roster construction and future direction, and those are very different conversations in front offices compared to typical roster moves. One key detail from Howie's comments that people are overlooking is that the Eagles were already preparing for this scenario over time. They did not wake up one day and decide to move on. They gradually built a receiver room that could survive without him, adding young talent and depth pieces so that the offense would not completely collapse after his departure. When you view it from that angle, the trade starts to make more sense. At a certain point, when a player of A.J. Brown's caliber wants a fresh start, the question is no longer whether you want to keep him, but rather what type of return allows you to reshape the roster in the smartest possible way moving forward, while also maintaining long-term cap health and draft flexibility. That brings us directly to the most debated part of this entire deal, which is the compensation. The Eagles received a 2028 first-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick from the New England Patriots, and as soon as that information came out, the reaction from the fan base was immediate and emotional, because many people felt that the return did not match the level of player that was being traded. That reaction is understandable because A.J. Brown is not a normal wide receiver. He consistently demanded double coverage, changed defensive game plans every single week, and averaged over 1,400 receiving yards per season during his time in Philadelphia. That level of production is extremely difficult to replace, and when a player like that leaves, anything short of a massive haul will naturally feel underwhelming at first glance. However, from Howie's perspective, the focus is not just on immediate value, but on long-term flexibility. He pushed back against the idea that a future first-round pick automatically loses value simply because it is several years away. In reality, the Eagles preferred that uncertainty because nobody knows what the Patriots will look like in 2028. Nobody knows who their quarterback will be at that time, and nobody knows where that pick will ultimately land in the draft order. Another key point from the broader discussion is that this was not a situation driven by multiple teams aggressively pushing the price higher. Instead, it played out as a focused negotiation between two sides, where New England emerged as the most serious and realistic landing spot for A.J. Brown. That limited market dynamic naturally shaped the structure of the final return and how the deal ultimately came together. That uncertainty is exactly what creates potential upside. That selection could turn into a high-value asset depending on how the franchise develops over time, and even if it does not, it still holds strong trade value in future negotiations. The Eagles can use that pick as a trade chip in a larger deal if they decide to pursue another star player, which means it gives them optionality rather than locking them into a single outcome. On top of that, there is also the financial angle that was emphasized in the discussion. Moving A.J. Brown clears significant future cash obligations, giving the Eagles more room to handle upcoming extensions for core defensive players. That flexibility is not just about today's roster, but about sustaining competitiveness over the next several seasons. But regardless of how the front office evaluates it, one reality does not change, and that is the fact that when Week 1 arrives, A.J. Brown will no longer be on the field for the Eagles. While most of the attention was on the trade itself, the Eagles also made a quieter move by signing wide receiver Samori Toure. On paper, it looks like a minor depth addition, but the intention behind it is more strategic than it appears. Samori Toure brings familiarity with concepts that align with the offensive system the Eagles are moving toward under Sean Mannion, which means he already understands parts of the terminology, route structure, and timing principles that other receivers will need time to learn.
This type of signing is not about replacing production, but about easing transition inside a reshaped receiver room. Because the Eagles are not trying to replace A.J. Brown with a single player, they're attempting to distribute that responsibility across multiple weapons and skill sets. That is why Devonta Smith is now stepping into a significantly larger role as the primary target in the offense. For years, he has been one of the most efficient and technically refined receivers in the league, but he has mostly operated in a secondary role alongside A.J. Brown. Now that changes completely because he will be the main focal point of opposing defenses, which means more bracket coverage, more attention at the line of scrimmage, and more defensive game plans designed specifically to limit his impact. At the same time, Jalen Hurts also enters a very different phase of his career because for the past few seasons, A.J. Brown was his most reliable option in critical moments. Whether it was third down situations or broken plays outside the structure of the offense, he provided a safety valve that consistently bailed out drives. Without him, the offense must become more structured and more timing-based rather than relying on individual matchups to create explosive plays. If Jalen Hurts can adjust to that style of play and operate efficiently within structure, it could significantly improve how the league evaluates his passing ability. However, if the offense struggles to find rhythm without that dominant outside presence, the impact of losing A.J. Brown will become very noticeable very quickly. When you step back and look at everything together, this is not just a trade, but a complete shift in offensive identity. The Eagles are clearly betting on structure, depth, and flexibility rather than relying on a single superstar to carry the passing game. It is a philosophical change as much as it is a roster move, and now everything comes down to how quickly the new system can come together, how quickly chemistry develops between the quarterbacks and receivers, and whether the coaching staff can design an offense that spreads production evenly instead of depending on isolation plays. The coaching staff will also have to adjust in-game decision-making in tighter situations, because without a dominant outside receiver, red zone efficiency becomes more dependent on schemed separation rather than individual wins, especially against top defenses late in the season. The A.J. Brown era in Philadelphia is officially over, and a new chapter begins with a very different-looking offense heading into 2026. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this is one of the biggest decisions this franchise has made in years. And if you are not subscribed yet, make sure you hit that button because we are just getting started. Fly, Eagles, fly!